Wow, so we're going with some Bee Gees here to begin at the show, huh, Gus? But yeah, welcome in to episode 19 of Two Countries, Two Americas, All Sports. It is March 8th, 2022. I'm Nicholas Hill live here from Chattanooga, Tennessee, United States, and joining me always is the aforementioned Gus Tomazeli down in Americana, Sao Paulo, Brazil. Gus, how are you doing here on this March evening?
Good, good. And the reason I picked this song is because, today is International Women's Day. So it's like, that's one of the iconic songs I remember, at least American song.
Absolutely.
That's what I remember, at least. I don't know what song it stood out to you in terms
I'm
of,
trying to think, what would be the number one well, I mean, it's like probably "Dangerous Woman" by Ariana Grande. That probably would have been like the first at least song about women I would have possibly played in this situation. But I mean, there's a lot out there. But yeah, so happy International Women's Day, and to discuss this particular topic, I feel like when we take a look at a lot of the sports topics, I mean, let's be honest here, 90 to 95% of the topics we discuss are men's sports. So we want to give a little bit of love to women's sports here at least begin today's episode. And you know, starting off with you guys, I know you wanted to bring up perhaps, in your opinion, one of the best women's sporting events you've watched, and something that you recall from your childhood.
Oh, yes. I mean, since our podcast is mostly about United States and Brazilian sports, for me, one of the my most my strongest memories in terms of women's sports will definitely be the 1996 Olympics women's basketball final between U.S., which was hosting the Olympics, versus Brazil, because Brazil was loaded. The Brazilian team was loaded. It was a team that was filled with Hall of Famers. Hortensia, Paula, Jeanette. It was a team that won the 1994 World Cup. So it was, a once in a generation talent team. And US, of course, had a loaded team as well with Katrina McLean, Dawn Staley, Cheryl Shoops. So you know, and Brazilians were really hoping to get this win because, and of course, their fresh in their memory was, Brazil defeating U.S. in basketball in the United States in the 1988 Pan American Games in Indianapolis. So they wanted to repeat that, especially in the Olympics, especially in a sport that Brazil never won a gold medal, but it came out short. One 111 to 87. U.S. ran over, especially, got a good lead at the first half. But I still feel like that was one of the most, moments that I'll always remember because this, team, and I was so happy when I went to the Women's Basketball Hall of Fame in Knoxville, Tennessee, and seeing those Brazilian players being recognized. And it's a shame that in Brazil they are not. Unfortunately, they are not. I was, and even I was even sad because I was neighbor to Jeanette, a player that I just mentioned when I lived in Santo Andre, and I ran into her a lot of times. But now I realize, I should have give more value. I should have take pictures, and I should have wanna, be more like a fan because I feel like she meant something, and I probably only recognized that when I saw her picture in the Women's Basketball Hall of Fame in Knoxville, and along with Paula and Hortensia, those women really changed the landscape of women's basketball in Brazil. If if today there's even Brazilian women playing in college basketball in America, and I was fortunate enough to interview one, Emanuele, who had her senior day for the Florida Gators a couple of weeks ago, is because of the influence of Paula, Hortensia, and Jeanette back in the 90s. So I feel like because a lot of people today want to bring up International Women's Day of like the disparity between women and men, and and of course there is, and of course talk about. But I want to bring up positive memories, as we always bring to any sport that we or any topic. I want to bring memories, or I want to bring important moments, because that's what I believe women wants to be recognized. They don't want to feel, kind of like, feel like, oh, poor, like feel like, they want to feel recognized, and the best way to do it is recognize great moments like that one. That for me, and another great moment, and it was a happy moment for me, was the 2007 Women's World Cup semifinals, where Brazil defeated US 4-0 with one of the most beautiful goals I have ever seen in soccer. I even have to find this goal on YouTube, because I will never forget Marta scoring that goal versus US in a semifinal. A goal that was, like for the ages, like, so
Marta
I
always was a big problem for the U.S. women's team. Like she did very well against them on multiple occasions.
Oh yeah, yeah, that's true. Yeah, she was. I mean, she was.
Just the
She. I
list.
mean, she's the best. I mean, she's probably the best soccer player ever. She was fantastic, and they plays for she plays for Orlando City, and so America is fortunate. I found it. Like, this was for
That's how
me.
the Japanese goalkeeper for I can't remember her name, but the Japanese goalkeeper in 2011 and 15 to an extent. Like she gave the U.S. a ton of problems, of course, helping Japan upset the U.S.
Like,
in the gold medal game that year.
like this moment. Like, look at the way she dominates the ball, passes the defender, gives it like, the magic of like the dribble from the back. She like dribbles without seeing the defender. Like, it's like I never seen something like that. So I mean, that was a moment, that is historical for soccer in general, not only women's soccer, but in soccer. And all the Brazilians after this game, everybody in Brazil was confident that the women's team will finally win their first ever World Cup, but they fall short 2-0 versus Germany, and Marta even missed a penalty during the game. I remember I was rooting that game so bad, but when Marta missed the penalty, I remember, oh, it's done. Oh, it's done. I mean, she she didn't deserve that. I mean, sometimes even great players, the greatest, will always be remembered for things that, for moments like that. Probably Marta still plays in her head, that penalty that she missed, that probably would have changed the landscape for women's soccer in Brazil.
Right. And there's a couple of points definitely I want to hit on there. I guess I'll kind of do like a horseshoe. So I'll start with women's soccer. So obviously in the U.S., the U.S. women's soccer team is the best one in the world. Kind of seen them win two World Cups, 2015 and 2019. They're back-to-back champions. They're runner-ups in 2011. So those are the three I've gotten to watch of them. And obviously they're always very well coached, very well organized. Jill Ellis. Uh, Obviously had those had our players always ready to go, and just all the different superstars. Abby Wambach, Mega Rapinoe. Uh, it's
Even
just
Hope
a couple
Solo, I always
Hope
remember Hope
Solo.
Solo. Even all her controversy, she was a fantastic goalkeeper.
Oh, absolutely. Alex Morgan is another name that always played well, and Carly Lloyd, especially in the 2015 final, because I think she had what 4 goals in that game, including one from half goal. And since you showed that goal, I gotta find this one. It was the 2015 half field goal from the. Um, let's see. I'm pulling this
I
up
do. I
now.
can find it here.
Here, hold on. I'm going to send you the link real quick because this was unreal.
I found it. Oh yeah, in Brazil we refer to that kind of moment as the goal Pelé never scored, because when he tried in the 1970 World Cup, he couldn't make it. So we always called it a moment like that, a goal Pelé never scored.
Hmm. Yeah, do you have it pulled up? Because this one, um, I remember that I went nuts after this one. Yeah, so this is 2015. This is in Vancouver. This is U.S. Japan.
In a final game, in the finals. Not
It's already
only
3-0. It's at 14 minutes in the game. The U.S. came out um, because obviously they were angry that they had lost 4 years before, and yeah, just shot in from the circle at mid pitch. I mean, Carly Lloyd just nukes that ball all the way across the field there, and I mean, it's one of the most impressive things I've seen on a soccer field in period. And pretty much, at that point, the U.S. was going to win pretty comfortably in that game. It's still insane to me that they scored 4 goals in the first 15 minutes to win it.
it's unheard of. Uh, Probably the game that come close to that one was Brazil and Germany in a World Cup semifinal, where Germany scored 5 goals in 30 minutes.
Yeah,
But that was a final game, and it was 15 minutes, 4 goals.
yeah, it's pretty remarkable. And obviously, the U.S. women's team are right now for controversy for a lot of stuff off the field, but no one can take away from what they've been able to accomplish on the field. And at least even though the men's team is frustrating to watch, at least the women's team is equally I think enjoyable to watch. Can I go back to basketball? Obviously being from Tennessee. Oh, go
But
ahead.
one thing I want to ask about women's soccer in America about it is like, why do you think the league, I think it's called
The
NP,
NWSL.
I feel like they never catch on. I feel like they never got a momentum or never got popular. And that's at least
I
when I
mean,
was
they're playing on okay. So the first time I had ever heard of this league, I was at my grandmother's house. She has it on Lifetime, and the games are airing on the Lifetime channel. And if you don't know what the Lifetime channel is, basically it's a uh, I don't even know how to describe it.
a
It's
weird movie
movies.
channel. It's a weird
Yeah,
movie channel. Can see that.
it's made for TV movies that are very generic, and just randomly these soccer games would show up on it. I'm just like, you can't get them on ESPN or anything because I think they now started showing something on CBS, which maybe that will help, increase um, any
The popularity,
the
yeah.
popularity. But still, I mean, they're getting buried on secondary channels that I don't feel like there's strong advertisement for it. If I hadn't caught it when I did because of where it was, I would have never known it was on. So, but then again, how much do they have for advertisement? I don't know, but I do think maybe if the league like the NWSL could be a guinea pig for the future of sports television, because I think the future of sports television goes beyond cable TV, and it's going to go more to streaming and what you can put online. So maybe you can build an audience that way. But let's be honest here, outside of the World Cup every 4 years, women's soccer is kind of a niche product. You have college women's soccer, but that doesn't have a giant audience either. So I don't know really what the solution is. Obviously, people are going to watch the World Cup, but that's the World Cup. Even when it comes to men's soccer here, you know, people love the World Cup every 4 years, but they don't exactly come out and support MLS the same way. So it's a I don't know how you fix that.
Yeah, I'm surprised though. I'm optimistic because it seems like finally women's soccer is catching on in Brazil in terms of domestic league. We just had the Brazilian Super Cup a couple of weeks ago, and the stadiums were had a decent amount of fans, especially Corinthians fans. And Corinthians ended up winning the tournament. And the state tournament got 30,000 fans in a final. So that was really impressive. Of course, it was like a rivalry game, and you know, fans were just coming back to the stadiums, but still, and like now the Brazilian women's championship just started. They're playing nice stadiums and like the same as the men sometimes, and they're even showing on the main sports channels and the main sports shows. So shout out to Bruno Slonik. He covers, women's soccer as well. And I want to ask to Bruno as well. What is his moment that he always remembers in women's sports because we're doing kind of like that now. But I feel like I'm optimistic. I feel like it's growing. But one thing that women's sports and women's soccer can't push is that I feel like they have to have baby steps. They can't. They I feel like they feel frustrated if they expect to reach the same popularity as a man's game, in a stance or in a few years. It takes time to build an audience, to build, a level of popularity. So that's what I feel like. I feel like it's baby steps, and this steps is happening, and people are starting to get interested in women's soccer.
Yeah, I think Bruno had a good comment here. The skateboard women's event at the Olympics that debuted in the last Olympics. Yeah, I thought that was actually very entertaining to watch. Obviously, it was at a bad time because most of that was going on in the overnight, but I did catch a little bit of it. And I really can't wait to see this in Paris with fans. I feel like with fans, that's going to be an incredible atmosphere. It was kind of weird this year with them just kind of just skating around in the empty skate park. That was just the last two Olympics. In general, we need fans back at the Olympics. But kind of back on the NWSL, maybe they benefit off of the MLB strike. And of course, I'm going to talk a little bit about that here later in the show. You know, that's going to leave options out there. Like you got both MLS and NWSL are going to be playing. So could soccer kind of take away some of those baseball fans? I think the USFL, they are debuting on April 16th. They could have an opportunity to gain some fans who otherwise would be watching baseball. And even I think NASCAR has a shot too. Really, I think turn the tide back some because their ratings this year are doing way better so far with the new car. But I kind of wanted to flip the conversation back to basketball here because I'm from Tennessee, right? So obviously Pat Summitt, the Lady Vols, are synonymous with women's basketball. There's a reason why the Women's Basketball Hall of Fame is in Knoxville because if Pat Summitt never existed, I think it would have taken a lot longer for women's basketball to become as popular as it is. And I mean, she is, I think, the founding mother of modern college basketball or women's college basketball. Like, there's no, I think, single figure anywhere else in college sports that is as important as Pat Summitt. So obviously, I care deeply about, especially women's college basketball. When it comes to the Lady Vols, you know, they haven't been as great the last decade as I would like them to. They've still been pretty good, and this year they're pretty good. Sans some injuries in the last month, they're probably going to be, I think, a 4 or 5 seed this year in the women's tournament. But beyond that, I can remember their last two national titles back in 2007, 2008, when they were both led by Candace Parker. And Candace Parker is in my opinion, the best women's player since I've started watching in 2006, and I might be a little bit biased. I know some people are going to say Maya Moore, Brianna Stewart, Brittany Griner, or were better. But to me, Candace Parker is the best one. Leading Tennessee back-to-back championships, overcoming LSU by a point in the semifinals in 2008, beating Rutgers and beating Stanford for the last two national titles. Those were just really fun teams to watch. I remember the fan base around here was getting into them because it's Pat Summitt. Like that court is named the Summitt. How many basketball courts out there are named for their women's basketball coach? Not many, except at Tennessee, because Pat Summitt is a living legend. God rest her soul. And it's just I'm always going to believe the Lady Vols are going to have a shot because I know of their pedigree and the type of talent that they can attract to Knoxville because of what they mean to the history of college basketball.
Oh yeah, for sure. And I was trying to find. I believe even Pat Summitt played. She coached against Brazil in 1983. She came to Sao Paulo in the 1983 FIBA World Cup, the tournament, and I believe, yeah, Brazil ended up second just behind US.
Yeah. I mean, Pat Summitt, she won multiple Olympics, won multiple FIBA World Cups. Um, so yeah, I mean, she won basically everything there was to win. So it doesn't strike me Brazil has played Pat Summitt, but she's probably the most legendary sports figure from the state of Tennessee, outside of maybe like a Peyton Manning. But I mean, Pat Summitt, it might be more legendary than that just because of what she means for the entirety of women's athletics. I mean, the NFL would still be the same if Peyton Manning didn't exist. But I don't know if women's college basketball would be the same if Pat Summitt never existed.
Oh
Um,
yeah, she's a legend. She was a remarkable coach, and yeah, I mean her legacy was so strong because the way she coached it influenced the whole sport. I don't even remember a coach that was so great at his or her sport that the shape of the sport or the shape of the league was changed after you know when after he or she entered the sport because like women's basketball is one before Pat Summit and is another after she left.
well, absolutely. I mean, ladies ball basketball has not been the same since she had to retire in the in 2011. It's not like Kelly Warlick or Kelly Harper have done bad jobs. They're not Pat Summitt, and no one I feel like is asking them to be that. And of course, obviously, the best coaches in the modern game you have Dawn Staley, who you mentioned earlier as a player. She's now a great coach at South Carolina. Gina Ariama has dominated for a long time. There's Tara Vanderveer over at Stanford. And and this tournament coming up is going to be really interesting too. There's a lot of interesting teams out there. I think one player to watch this year, if you've never watched her, watch Caitlin Clark for Iowa. She to me is one of the best 3 point shooters I've ever seen in a women's game. She almost reminds me a lot of Curry, in terms of like her play style. Like she can pull up from anywhere on the court and it's just exciting to watch. She had like I think 51 against Michigan earlier this year. Like she carries the Iowa Hawkeyes, and I don't think she has enough help to go on a national title run. But yeah, I think she could have like a second weekend type run. I saw her beat Kentucky single handedly last year as a freshman, and I think she's a sophomore this year. So Caitlin Clark, the Iowa Hawkeyes, check them out in the tournament. I'm not sure what seed they're going to be. I haven't watched a ton of their games this year, but Caitlin Clark is
Eh,
the real deal.
And speaking of women's basketball, I have to mention definitely Americana's women's basketball team because that was one of the best basketball women's basketball team I ever saw. I was even felt ashamed and sad that I never attended a game because I always took for granted. They won 5 national championships, 7 state national championship, and 2 South American championships. So I feel like it was the most successful sports team Americana ever had. Unfortunately, it was discontinued after the won the last national championship in 2017. But still, it lives in the hearts and minds of Americana sports fans. I remember Centro Cívico Gymnasium was full crowds to watch, the rivalries with Ourinhos and Santo André, because those were historical moments. I remember watching a semifinals, I believe it was 2011, between Santo André and Americana, and those are relentless games, and I
Mm-hmm.
remember the team coach, Paulo Basu, one of the best women's basketball coaches, and Lais Elena as well. I that for me was, I missed dearly Americana women's basketball team because it's just it carried the name of my city, not only in the state of São Paulo, but you know to all Brazil.
Absolutely. I mean, any team I think can provide hope over any given period of time if they play with a certain tenacity and a certain attitude. But I think this also can extend into individual sports. Think of UFC, IndyCar, NASCAR. Um, we've seen some women do decently well in those arenas too. Like for example, Danica Patrick. Obviously, she didn't do that well in NASCAR. She had a pole, and I think two or three top tens in her career. Didn't do great in NASCAR, but in the IndyCar, she was actually a pretty decent driver. Won a race. The only woman to ever win a race in IndyCar. She won at I think it's Suzuka in Japan. Is the one. I know it's Twin Ring Motegi is the track that she won in 2006 for IndyCar. And then UFC. I mean, obviously Ronda Rousey was one of the biggest names in all mixed martial arts for years until Amanda Nunes knocked her out. Of course, Amanda Nunes is recognized as one of the biggest names in MMA. So certainly, women have increasingly gotten their names into the spotlight in many sports. Some team sports, some individual. And of course, obviously, you think about tennis with like Serena Williams, Venus Williams, Naomi Osaka, for example, are all names that are big time celebrities because of their accomplishments on in tennis.
Yeah, I mean, if you mention women's tennis, I have to mention one of the greatest, Maria Esther Bueno. I mean, she won 4 times the U.S. Open, back to back in 1963 and 1964, and also 1959 and 1966. She also won 3 times Wimbledon, 1 time the French Opening, and another time the Australian Open. And she was the highest ranking women's tennis in 1959. So, uh, you know, even though it was a long time ago, she made history in terms of women's tennis here in Brazil.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, and that's just amazing to see. And runs like that can put a whole country on the map. And Kazumi Osaka, I mean, she's really elevated the face of Japanese tennis because she's the most successful player to ever represent that country. And it's really good for the sport to have personalities like that. Of course, she's obviously big off the court as well. She has a well publicized relationship with Corday, who's a emerging rapper in the hip hop scene. So I mean, it's increasing the visibility of these athletes. That's extremely important, and that's I think what the ultimate goal of women's athletics should be. Right, is to give these women the same opportunities to monetize themselves, to be as financially successful as their male counterparts, so they can go um, and make money. For example, I think of Paige Beckers from UConn. She I think had like $1 million in NIL this year. Which we were thinking that was only reserved for like the quarterbacks of college football. Not necessarily. I mean, Paige Beckers probably has a bigger profile than really a lot of the college basketball players because of the one and dones rule in the men's college basketball. It has a higher profile than many of the WNBA players. To be frank with you, because more people watch women's college basketball than WNBA. That's a discussion for another day. Is how do you increase the visibility of the WNBA? Because a lot of people don't see the WNBA's product as very good, at least compared to the NBA. But yeah, it is it's always going to be a trial and error, to see what sports stick with the general populace because there's just so many options. But I think now more than ever, there are options out there for women to be celebrities in sports.
Oh yeah, for sure, for sure. It's like it's the same thing here in Brazil. You talk about even basketball. Be- in the early 2000s, even 2010, women's basketball league was much more organized and way more They were had more viewers than the men's one, but the men's reorganized and had a better league, and now they're kind of in front. But I'm proud of the women's league here in Brazil. They attracted even international players. A player that we both watched it Tennessee, Kesha Kishkirwa, played here in Brazil for Sampaio Correia.
Yeah. I mean, it's again, it's just all about whatever the best fit is for these leagues, for these athletes. And ultimately, I think most rational people just want them to have the same opportunities, and we'll see where the cards lie. And obviously, just because that was a big discussion point of March Madness last year. Why did the women's bubble in San Antonio not have a lot of the same amenities as the men's bubble in Indianapolis? I mean, that was kind of straight up just discrimination by the NCAA, and that hopefully has been addressed. I believe NCAA said they are taking steps to do that, and we'll see this year what happens. And fortunately, one of the great things now is we got social media. So these women's players, if they're not getting that same treatment that male counterparts are, they can, expose that to the world like the players in San Antonio did last year. And hopefully they continue to get treated equally uh, because, I mean, they're being ran by the same organization, even if the men's tournament is technically bringing in more revenue.
Oh yeah, definitely, and that's what we want. To women's sports to be able to. They don't want more. They just want the same opportunity. They just want to be recognized, and that's what I'm doing today. That's what I'm with this platform for, to recognize the greatest, to recognize great moments and great history in women's sports. Again, happy International Women's Day, and from me and Nick here on our two countries, to America's all sports podcast. And I love, remember great rivalry games between U.S. and Brazil in women's sports, because you know that's what podcasts are. Two countries, two Americas. So in all sports, we talk about
All
women.
sports.
Yeah,
All sports.
all sports. Women's basketball final in '96, the semifinals in 2004, the final in 2004. The U.S. beat Brazil. So in 2007, the revenge. But definitely. So let's move on to America sports, because what a day we had in the National Football League quarterback market, right, Nick?
Oh yeah. So it kind of started earlier this morning with Aaron Rodgers. So Aaron Rodgers. Let me step back. So yesterday, the NFL raised their salary cap to $208.2 million, up by over 26 million. So it came out earlier today that Aaron Rodgers has reportedly, now this isn't official, Aaron Rodgers said that isn't exact, but according to Ear Rappaport, 4 years, $200 million, 153 million guaranteed, an average of 50 million a year. Which actually means Aaron Rodgers would be getting paid roughly a quarter of the salary cap. Okay. So that is a blockbuster move. I believe the highest before there was like 44 million. So that's breaking the quarterback market like crazy. Um, and Russell Wilson. And we'll definitely. I certainly have my questions on whether or not that's smart. But on the other end, Russell Wilson. Russell Wilson, has played for Seattle his entire career, but this year has some injury issues. Seattle had a terrible season. He's starting to get a little up there in age. But the Denver Broncos, ever since Peyton Manning retired, has struggled at quarterback. They went for Trevor Siemian. They attempted to get Paxton Lynch developed to be the quarterback of the future. That didn't work. They brought in Drew Lock. That hasn't worked. Teddy Bridgewater has just been kind of a placeholder. But the Denver Broncos have sent Drew Lock, tight end Noah Fant, defensive lineman Shelby Harris, the next two first-round picks, their next two second-round picks, and this year's fifth-round pick to Seattle for Wilson, and a 2022 fourth-round pick. So the Denver Broncos have given up a ton of draft capital for Russell Wilson, which basically means they believe they can win now. And I think they have a lot of good pieces. They got some good running backs, good receivers, and good defense. But they play in a tough division, the AFC West. I mean, the AFC West, think about this. They have Patrick Mahomes, Russell Wilson, Justin Herbert, and Derek Carr as the four starter quarterbacks. And every one of those teams have a lot of talent on them.
But you mentioned about divisions, and but Russell Wilson is also escaping a tough division. Both teams that made it to the NFC Championship were from the NFC West, and
Right.
the other wild card team also made it from the NFC West. Arizona Cardinals with Kyler Murray. So it's not like Russell Wilson, you know, went from a bad division like Aaron Rodgers. If Aaron left Green Bay, he would have left a lousy division and go like let's say to Pittsburgh, which a lot of rumors were saying would go to a really tough AFC, tough division, with Burrow, Lamar Jackson, and Baker Mayfield. But I feel like if he thought about like if I'm on a tough division, I'm gonna go on a division with quarterbacks that are less experienced than I am, and also Justin Herbert and Derek Carr, they're great, but they didn't make the playoffs last season. The Chargers coach is still first year head coach, and not like he proved himself yet. And Las Vegas Raiders, they have a great quarterback, but the rest was a tire fire, including a mid-season coaching change. So that all played a factor probably with Russell Wilson's decision.
Well, I don't know how much of this was Russell Wilson's decision. He got traded away. I think this is like Seattle getting offered a ton of draft picks and realizing, okay, we'll punt on this season, but we'll be fine moving forward because we're going to have multiple first round picks and multiple second round picks. I mean, think about this: you have 4 first round picks and 4 second round picks in the next 2 years. I mean, you don't turn that down when you have an aging Russell Wilson because his best days might be behind him. I doubt that you can make a run this year with whatever moves you could have made. I think this is actually a really smart move by the Seattle Seahawks. But I think this is also a smart move for Denver. Denver has a lot of good pieces. They have really good receivers. They have Tim Patrick. They have Cortland Sutton. Um, I'm kind of surprised they gave away Noah Fant because I think he really would have fit in well with Russell Wilson. But I guess you had to do what you do to get Wilson. And yeah, the Chargers. I think the Chargers are probably still a more talented offense than the Broncos, but their defense has a lot to be decided. I got to rebuild that defense in this offseason. And they just spent a lot more on keeping Mike Williams at free 8 years, $60 million. So I don't know where you're going to get more money to buy some better defensive players, but that's the Los Angeles Chargers. Of course, the Kansas City Chiefs are vulnerable. Let's just say that because you got Patrick Mahomes, and as long as you have him, you're going to be a Super Bowl contender. But their defense is suspect. Their offensive line is suspect. They don't really have a great running back, so they're beatable, right? Uh, I think if you're Denver, you had to attempt something like this to be competitive. And that's how Denver's won in the past. Think about how has Denver won each one of their 3 Super Bowls. They won 2 with an aging John Elway. They won 1 with an aging Peyton Manning. And now they're going to have a shot maybe to win with an aging Russell Wilson. They always seem to do best with veteran quarterbacks. And I don't blame him for going back to the drawing board and attempting this. John Elway did this once before with Peyton Manning, and he's going to attempt to do it again with Russell Wilson. On the Packers, I've got so many questions on this. So, why in the world did they pick Jordan Love 2 years ago? What was the point of picking Jordan Love with the 26th overall pick in the 2020 draft if you were just going to sign Aaron Rodgers 2 years later to a $200 million contract for 4 years when he's what? He's like, what, 38 years old, right? I mean, he is getting up there. And I know Tom Brady played to the age of 44, but there's no guarantee Aaron Rodgers is going to play as long. Like he could, but at some point he's going to fall off. And let's be honest, he didn't exactly play well against the San Francisco 49ers in the last game that we just saw him in. And I know he was just the MVP, the 2-time reigning MVP. But you haven't made the moves, I feel like, to win the Super Bowl. You haven't given them, outside of Devontae Adams, a lot of great weapons. You have decent running backs, you have a good offensive line. But now that you're paying Aaron Rodgers $200 million over the next 4 years, it makes it makes constructing the rest of the roster a lot more challenging. And it's going to make it that much harder to win Super Bowl because, yeah, you could have won the NFC North. NFC North sucks. But are you going to be able to overcome the NFC West teams? Can you finally beat San Francisco? Can you beat the Rams? Can you beat the Cowboys if they can get their stuff together? These are the questions that need to be asked of the Packers. And I just, you better win a Super Bowl by making a move like this. Because if you don't win a Super Bowl in the next 4 years, you've slipped and had a massive pie land on your face because you failed to get Aaron Rodgers the as much support as you possibly could have when your first round pick 2 years ago, and now I don't know what happens to Jordan Love now. I guess you got to trade him because I would trade him. I mean, if a
Yeah,
team is
like
willing.
definitely with that decision, it just, but also this decision just really showed how much the Green Bay Packers whiffed on that draft choice. And Aaron Rodgers feels so entitled that because it's like he wants to be the highest paid quarterback to show how that choice was such a mistake. I feel like he wanted to prove a point.
Yeah, I feel like he wants to prove a point more than win a championship. Because if he wouldn't have won a championship, he would have gone, to a different team. He would have tried to go to Denver. Because I think Denver probably would have wanted him over Russell Wilson. But when Aaron Rodgers wanted that type of money, Denver wasn't willing to pay that. They would rather trade away a ton of picks to get Russell Wilson. Obviously, there's a lot of rumors with the Titans. I don't think the Titans would have paid that much. I'm kind of glad that he didn't, because as much as I would have loved to upgrade from Ryan Tannehill to Aaron Rodgers, because I think, as you know, Ryan Tannehill, good regular season quarterback, terrible postseason quarterback. You're not going to win a Super Bowl with him. I don't want to have to give up a lot of other pieces to get Aaron Rodgers, because that's what you're going to have to do. And ultimately, the point's mute, and you're not going to win a championship because Aaron Rodgers, as great of a quarterback as he is, he only has one ring. We're acting like Aaron Rodgers has won like 4 or 5 rings, like it's Joe Montana or Tom Brady. He's not.
He
He'll
missed
put
a
up a
lot of
lot of.
ring opportunities. He went
Yeah, he
to
is.
back-to-back NFC championships. He lost at home to Brady and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. He lost, I believe, it was like 4 NFC championships since he won the Super Bowl. I remember Atlanta won in 2016, and San Francisco 2019, San Francisco 49ers 2020, Tampa Bay in 2021. So there was so many NFC championships opportunities that the Packers, didn't even make it to the Super Bowl during the span of 1 decade.
No, absolutely. A lot of my friends actually were blowing up my phone a second ago because the Titans have signed Harold Landry to a 5-year, $87 million contract, which is, I think, a fantastic move. A move that you wouldn't have been able to make if you go and pay Aaron Rodgers. So at least the Titans are going to have an amazing front seven for years to come. But yeah, for the rest of the quarterback market outside of Russell Wilson and Aaron Rodgers now, the question is what happens now. So Drew Lock now is with Seattle. I guess if you're Seattle, you go with Drew Lock as your starter next year. You might want to draft a quarterback as his backup to develop because I don't know how much you believe in Drew Lock. You still got the Buccaneers out there. They need to figure out what they're going to do with their quarterback situation. Was talking to a fan of theirs today, and he believes that Kyle Trask right now might be the guy starting next year. So that's an interesting turn of events there. The Saints, are they going to keep just Jameis Winston? They're going to try to draft someone. And I really think still the wild card here, the ultimate wild card, is Deshaun Watson going to get a second chance? I think he has the talent to be a top 5, 10 quarterback in the entire league. But who is willing to give Deshaun Watson that chance? If he is on the table for someone, that completely shifts the entire quarterback market. Because if he's not on the market, then who's truly the best quarterback out there? Could Kirk Cousins go on the market? Could Jimmy Garoppolo go on the market? I think there's some people who believe that Kirk Cousins is kind of a Matthew Stafford type quarterback, where he's very talented, he puts up great numbers, but has never had the true support. Now, granted, I do think in Minnesota, if you look at his offense, Alvin Cook's his running back. He has Justin Jefferson, Adam Thielen as his receivers. He's got a lot of support, at least on offense in Minnesota. So I don't think he's completely bereft of talent around him, and he's always been a kind of a stat pattern. But that's what they said about Matthew Stafford too. But they put him in a great situation in LA, and he won the Super Bowl. Could Kirk Cousins do the same thing? I don't know. Jimmy Garoppolo. A lot of people are not high on him right now. They think he was the main reason, and I agree with them that the 49ers did not win the Super Bowl. Does he get traded somewhere? There's been rumors about him going to a place like the Colts. Although I don't know why they would do that because I don't feel like that's much of an upgrade from Carson Wentz. And what other teams could be on there? Like obviously Washington, they need to get a quarterback. Will the Giants stick with Daniel Jones? I mean, they said they have, but do you get a better option down the road?
Quarterback, doesn't it? Big is tired.
Yeah. So a lot of people want Tennessee with Tannehill's implosion to change, but they're not going to. Let's just be real, guys. Tannehill's quarterback through at least next season.
And this draft class is not good. It's very. I mean,
the only quarterbacks I want to replace Tannehill with are off the market now, unless it's Deshaun Watson. I would totally replace Tannehill with
Deshaun Watson. The biggest mark. I think Deshaun Watson will go to history as the best, quarterback that never got the chance to actually play for a good team, or it's like the imaginary quarterback, because the time is going, time clock is ticking on his career.
Michael Vick got a second chance, and he did. Obviously he did an extremely bad thing, and it was in federal prison for 18 months, and was out of football for 3 years, but got back with the Philadelphia Eagles. So as long as someone believes that Deshaun Watson has the talent, I do think if everything is legally cleared, he's gonna have a shot somewhere. Because I know there were rumors at one point about him in Minnesota. But I don't think I would seriously doubt that's going to happen. I think it would have to be a team that's in a really desperate situation to get a quarterback at all, or a team that's really close to being a Super Bowl contender and believes that he would put them in that position. But it's all about, is Deshaun Watson even clear? Because things are so muddled because we don't know what's going on with Deshaun Watson. They won't say it. It's been like a year with him.
Yeah, that's the biggest.
Okay. So grand jury is poised to hear evidence in Deshaun Watson case on Friday, and Deshaun Watson is pleading the fifth in a civil disposition case in his criminal probe. So obviously he still has a lot of legal problems to go through. But depending on how that all shakes out, I'm not sure how long that's going to take. That could take through the end of this year, so he may not be on the market at all. But I do think at least by next year we'll know for sure. Okay, he's never getting back in football again, or he's about to be the hottest name in the market, and you're probably going to be able to get him for a good price too, because he's just going to be desperate, I think, to get back into football at that point.
Yeah, that's teams are waiting for this to unfold. They don't want to, go on a big trade or risk, something like that, and then got basically an athlete that the team can't use. So that's the big issue.
Yeah, and that's the problem for Houston right now. They can't unload him at all. That's why they had to settle for Davis Mills right now as their quarterback. So it's a tough situation if you're Houston, but we'll see what happens. I'll say this: as long as Deshaun Watson is cleared in a court of law, now obviously he was convicted for in a prison, then the point's mute. But if he is allowed to come back into football, someone will absolutely pick him up. But that's certainly, I think, where the Wilson and Rodgers news leads from today. But it's interesting to see how the rest of the season unfolds. The draft's coming up next month. I think we could see a couple of trades related to that. That really changes the landscape. And But to move on to March Madness. Dun, 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 dun. So Selection Sunday is this Sunday. So we'll know at 6 p.m. Eastern on Sunday, 8 p.m. Brazilian time, uh, who are the 68 teams that will be competing to win the national championship. And of course, on Monday night, we'll know the 64 women's teams. I believe that shows at 7 p.m. Eastern time, 9 p.m. Brazilian time to win the women's national title. So we'll start with the men here. I actually got to go to a game the other day, Tennessee.
That's the
Oh
music,
yeah,
right?
best sports music ever. But regardless of that, so I got to go to Tennessee Arkansas the other day. Knoxville was a really stressful game because the balls came out fire. They're at 50-29 at the half. They hit 9 3-pointers in the first half, but in the second half they came out a little flat. And Arkansas came out firing, and they came all the way back within I think like a point at one point. But the Vols held them off 78-74. Got the second seed in the SEC, tied for second overall in the regular season at 14-4 in conference play, 23-7 overall. And they are now ranked ninth in the AP poll. First time all year they've been in the top 10. So just an awesome turnaround for Rick Barnes and these guys. Because Rick Barnes has received some criticism throughout the year. And I'll be honest, I have criticized him too. I think the offense at times wasn't very fun to watch. It wasn't effective. But it's always been a really good defensive team. And the offense has gone a lot better as the years gone along. I really think the season turned around when Zakai Ziegler, the freshman guard from New York, really became a huge vocal point of this team. And the team took off. And there, of course, Kenny Chandler has been elite at times. Santiago Vescovi has emerged as one of the most consistent players for this team, a first team All SEC player. Josiah Jordan James has been a glue guy throughout this entire season. John Fulkerson has provided experience off the bench. Brandon Huntley Hatfield, joins I do, have really come on late as big men after Olivia Kamwa's injury a month ago. This team is very talented. Now, how far are they going to go? I don't know. It depends on the bracket. I think this team, if they're hot, they can make a really deep run. But at the same time, they have some tendencies that really worry me. So they tend to go on scoring droughts. They'll have 1 to 2 per game. It's been a mark of the Rick Barnes era. And it's kind of doomed them at times. Two, they seem to not play really well with the lead. Yeah, the 2 games last week, they were up 15 at Georgia late in the second half. Georgia came back and made it a 6-point game. Last week, they had a 21-point lead at the half against Arkansas. Arkansas came back and won the game, almost. You can't do that in March. Otherwise, you're going to get beat and get knocked out if you do that. So those are things I hope they can attempt to avoid for the tournament. They'll play in the SEC tournament starting on Friday. They're the 2 seed. They'll play either Mississippi State or South Carolina. Gus, I don't know how much of the games this week that you got to watch of Tennessee, but I'm very excited to see what they do here in the postseason.
I listened to a little bit of the first half. To be honest, I was in covering a game, but they fell so close to winning the regular season, but Auburn ended up getting the job done. I feel like they could be even a second, even a first seed if they win the SEC tournament. Maybe this is finally the year. Last year I was expecting to be the year. I think they were eliminated in the semifinal versus Alabama, which at the time had a really good team. I feel they can run. I feel like they could make it to the final. I feel like that's their goal.
Tough. It's gonna be really tough because the probable path, if they beat Mississippi State on Friday, which I think that's who they'll beat South Carolina, in my opinion. You probably have to play Kentucky on Saturday. And playing Kentucky on a neutral site court is going to be really difficult. I know the Vols dominated them on our home court, and they got dominated at Kentucky. I think in a neutral site game, it's going to be a really close game. I think Kentucky this year is really, really good, and the Vols, when Oscar Sheboy for Kentucky's playing at his best, don't have much of an answer for that. It's going to take a Herculean effort by guys like Jonas Idu and Brett Huntley Hatfield to really overcome that. And you're going to need to hit a ton of threes. And then you get past Kentucky, which I think that's going to be a knockdown, drag out fight. Then you probably have to play Auburn on Sunday or maybe Arkansas. And both of those teams on neutral sites are not great matchups either, I feel like, for Tennessee. Now, I know Tennessee beat all three of those teams at home, but Tennessee basically is unbeatable at home. On a neutral site game, I I don't know how much confidence I have in the Vols to beat any one of those three teams. I expect them to make it this Saturday, but I'm not picking anything past that. Now, for the tournament itself, I think that varies much because I think the top four of the SEC all have a chance to make deep runs depending on the brackets they are given. I don't want to go over any particular bracket like we did last week just for time reasons. We'll have a actual bracket to look at next week. But I'm really thinking, the main thing here is can the Vols find their way up to a 2 seed? Because right now they're projected to be a 3 seed. And especially if you beat Kentucky on Saturday, I think you get yourself a 2 seed. And that really increases your chances, I think, of making a deep run in the NCAA tournament because it's better matchups for you. And you get to avoid better teams until later on as long as you can avoid the upsets. And I believe every time Tennessee's been a 2 seed in the past 15 years, they've made it to the Sweet 16 every single time. The one time they made it to the Elite Eight, they were a 6 seed. So, in terms of their Final Four chances, it just depends. I can't hear you guys.
Oh, shout out to Nancy and Glenn, big Tennessee Athletic fans listening to us. They are from Knoxville, Tennessee, and big shout out. Glenn actually worked in the Tennessee Athletics department with Bud Jones. I remember back in 2016.
Oh, that's
So
pretty interesting.
yeah, I think he worked in more like the psychological part of the team, but he brought me to uh, couple of Tennessee games back in 2016. So shout out to Nancy and Glenn from Knoxville, Tennessee, listening to us, and Jeanette Tomazeli as well. But but your town is in the tournament, right, Nick? In the most
Chattanooga, the Mocs,
in
short
the
for the
most
Moccasins, if you don't know. But they call themselves just the Mocs straight right now. The Chattanooga Mocs of the Southern Conference won the championship last night. And you may have seen how they won it. David Jean Baptiste, he's a point guard for Chattanooga, hit a half-court shot at the end of their game against Furman and Asheville last night. In the most dramatic fashion, this game was nuts. So Chattanooga played horrible in the first half. They scored 16 points. They were down 26-16 at the half to Furman. Furman's a school in South Carolina. But then coming out of the gate, Furman scored a bucket. It was 28-16. Then the Mocs scored 13 straight points, took a 29-28 lead. It was back and forth the rest of the game. The Mocs got up by 3 late. It was 51-48. And I'm just sitting here screaming because the Mocs are my second favorite team behind the Vols. I'm just sitting here screaming, foul them. You should always foul up free. And for some reason, they weren't fouling up free. Furman kind of had a part of that. They were kind of passing around the ball, but there really didn't seem to be a lot of urgency by the Mocs to foul them. And they paid for it because Furman hit a three, and they tied the game and sent it to OT, 51 all. And then overtime was nuts, back and forth, back and forth. And with 4 seconds left, Furman scores a bucket to go up 61 or 63-61. And I'm thinking, oh boy, Chattanooga just blew it. But then David Baptiste takes it out of the backcourt and runs up past half court and heaves it and hits the shot. And the whole city goes nuts. I had people texting me from college, from my internship a couple months ago, asking me, hey, how's it like in Chattanooga right now? I mean, the Chattanooga was a center at the sports world for about an hour last night. Patrick Mahomes tweeted about Chattanooga, Tennessee. Just a surreal experience, probably the greatest moment in Chattanooga sports history, outside of when the Mocs made a run to the Sweet 16 back in 1997. Now, can this Mocs team do something like that? It depends on the matchup. Everything depends on matchups in March Madness. The strength of the Chattanooga Mocs team is their backcourt. John Baptiste, the guy who hit the game-winning shot, and Malachi Smith especially are very talented guards who I think can play with any guards in the country. Um, they're going to pose problems for any team. My concerns become more in depth. Now, obviously, Silvio De Souza, he used to play for Kansas. Now, as a starter for Chattanooga, he's very talented. But on him, the depth isn't great for this Chattanooga team. But if Malachi Smith and Baptiste are going crazy in the backcourt, um, and there's a couple other guys too on that team that can really shoot, Chattanooga could pose a Cinderella threat. I'll say this: if Chattanooga played a team like Providence, I'm picking the Mocs to win. If they play a team like Texas Tech, I'm not picking them to win. I think a team that's more susceptible to a team going again hot on them. That's a team that you should watch out for the Chattanooga Mocs to be a Cinderella for. So I'm very excited to see what they can do.
This team kind of reminds me of the ETSU Buccaneers, I think 2019, 2020. Of course, there was no NCAA tournament, but they made a good run. They look like a legit. I feel like Chattanooga could pose a threat like that, even coming from
Yeah.
SoCon.
Yeah, SoCon's had a history. Remember, Seth Curry was from the SoCon. Davidson almost made the Final Four. Mercer beat Duke when they were in the SoCon. Um, and I said Chattanooga back in 1997 made a run to the Sweet 16. Wofford, I know, won a game a couple of years ago. So the SoCon is a really good basketball conference and shouldn't be slept on as an entity. So it's a very exciting time to be in Chattanooga, and we'll see what matchup they get on Sunday.
Yeah, I mean, yeah,
Yeah,
definitely.
but in addition to one last game I want to talk about. I don't know if you got to see Duke UNC the other day, but UNC ran into Coach K's retirement ceremony and took it just really just embarrassed Duke on his retirement night in 94-81.
I've been telling this North Carolina team, I told you, Nick, to watch out for them. You were, you were, you didn't. I feel like I mean, I watched a little bit of that game, and it just proved that North Carolina Tar Heels team can be legit. Winning on the road at last Coach K's home game, it just showed that I don't know. Probably for them to make the tournament, they have to win the ACC tournament. But I mean, it's still there have a lot of tradition. It's still a basketball program that has a lot of history and a lot of they need to always be taken seriously. And I feel like even Coach K recognized that he felt he felt a little embarrassed and he wasn't pleased with the team's performance, right, Nick?
Oh, absolutely. I'll say this: this is a double-edged sword, right? UNC first and foremost, they're in the tournament. They'll probably be like an 8. Hubert Davis has turned around that team. They weren't very good early in the season, and they're still not a great defensive team, but obviously their offense has gotten going. And North Carolina is a team that's solidly in the tournament. Duke, though, their defense isn't very good. I mean, obviously Pablo Banchero is a really good player. They got some other good pieces on that team, but I think the hoopla around Coach K is getting to this team just a little bit. Now, I really do think that you don't want to play Duke in the ACC or the NCAA tournament because that team's going to be clawing for Coach K. And also, too, I don't think you're going to get a ton of calls against Duke. I think you're going to be playing against the refs because the storyline is going to be, can Coach K win one last title? And we'll be interested to see if any team can overcome the Duke machine in the NCAA tournament. But it's just insane that some people paid up to $500,000 apparently to watch Duke lose at home to UNC. Just a pretty remarkable night in Durham, North Carolina, for the North Carolina Tar Heels.
Yeah, yeah.
But
Yeah, I mean, it's just what I mentioned. It's like the Tar Heels. They even if they don't make the tournament or don't win the ACC, tournament, they still gonna pride on defeating their biggest rival in their legendary coach's last home game. That's something they gonna take pride on this season.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. And we'll see if they meet again this week in the ACC tournament. But I'm moving on to MLB. Obviously, they still haven't reached a deal. They might be a little bit closer now than they were last week, but they still seem like they are uh, far, far away. Now, the most recent uh, negotiations are, talking about increasing minimum salaries, changing the competitive balance tax, uh, debating whether or not to increase the pre-arbitration bonus pool. Just a whole bunch of little things that you shouldn't be canceling baseball, but they are. And yeah, I feel like we've said everything we could say on this last week and weeks past, but it's time for Rob Manfred to go. Um, they need a new commissioner that's going to prioritize getting baseball on the field because it's an absolute travesty to the game of baseball. This is occurring, and I think it's going to have really devastating effects for the sport.
I mean, the legacy of Rob Manfred, how he's gonna be remembered. The guy who dismantled minor league baseball, the commissioner who did a ridiculous punishment for a lot of fans in the Houston Astros cheating scandal, and now this CBA debacle and MLB, canceling the opening day. It's time for him to go. He butchered it. Like, again, making a comparison. When Roger Goodell took over the NFL was, of course, it was still a very important league, but it was dealing with a lot of controversy. It was mid 2000. There was a lot of, players getting off the field scandals. There was even the Patriots scandal. There was a lot of issues with the NFL, and you know, Roger Goodell just, you know, went through it, punished the players, were afraid to negotiate, you know, and now the NFL is the king of American sports league by 10 miles, not a mile, but 10 miles. So, and that's how show how important commissioners are. Commissioners can build the sport, build the league up. Bad commissioners can put the league downhill. And I feel like that's what Rob Manfred is doing. So it's time for him to go because there's no excuse for the CBA to take that long to be approved. And also, I feel like baseball is kind of Major League Baseball is being held hostage by the small market teams who are afraid to increase the luxury tax, so they have to spend more money to compete with the large the big teams like the Yankees and the Red Sox. But that's how sports league are today. You have to spend to compete. You can't withhold teams because you don't want to spend money.
Right. It's insane that like the Baltimore Orioles, for example, were paying like only $100 million for their entire roster compared to like the Yankees who are spending like four times that. Like there shouldn't be as disparity. There needs to be a bare minimum that teams should be compensating for, and like the whole tanking situation is just a disgrace. And when you have so many games anyway, and the interest in any game is going to be low just because there's so many games, you can't risk teams lowering that interest. So I want to get your take on something here. Pitch clock. The MLB is wanting to do a pitch clock of, I believe it's 14 seconds if there's no one on base, and 19 seconds if there is a runner on base. I just feel like that's just not baseball. Like there's a reason why baseball has no pitching clock, has no clock. We can't hear you, guys.
Oh, I was not happy because Comunicaciones just scored tying goal versus New York City FC in the
Ah,
CONCACAF Champions League quarterfinals. I mean, and I'm gonna get to that in a second. Talk about that because
right.
what a historical run. But going back to pitching clock again, I don't think this is gonna fix the game because I feel like they have. I think they didn't test it enough in minor league games. I feel like that's what minor league is for. Minor league is to test players, to see if they're good to make it to the majors. But you can use the minor league games to test new rules, new ideas. I don't, and I don't think they are using enough, in my opinion.
Oh yeah, for sure. It's just I mean, regardless of how long you think baseball games are, I mean, it's a baseball game. It's gonna go kind of long because it is a slow paced game, and that's kind of the point. You don't watch baseball to watch something fast paced. You watch it kind of unwind and watch a baseball game, no matter how long it takes. And that doesn't. I know that kind of contradicts the modern generations with lower attention spans. I'm not calling anyone out because I know I, with TikTok and stuff, probably have a lower attention span myself, but that's just I don't think you can butcher a game because a generation is beginning to change, and a pitching clock to me it kind of does that. So I don't know how this gets resolved. I'm still not holding my breath on seeing a lot of MLB this year. As I said earlier, go and watch some college baseball. But I know Gus, you have some American topics of your own you wanted to discuss.
I want to talk the soccer side of American sports because tonight, for me, it's a big deal. I know Americans don't care about. It's CONCACAF Champions League quarterfinals night. New York City FC, which to me right now is the most successful New York team right now. You can't dispute that. They just won the MLS Cup, which was New York's first major league title since I believe was the Giants in 2012.
I think so.
Yeah, because the Rangers have not won since '94. Jets have not won since 1971. The Knicks also haven't won since the '70s, and the I think the Islanders since the '80s, and the Brooklyn Nets have not won. So New York City FC, they just won the MLS Cup and they're in the quarterfinals. They scored first with Tati Castellanos at 29 minutes, but Manuel Gamboa just tied the game. The game has been played in East Rutherford, Connecticut, because Yankee Stadium and Citi Field were not approved by CONCACAF as the host to the game. The New York Red Bull Stadium, which is in New Jersey, was not available, so they had to play in Connecticut. The crowd is a decent crowd. I saw the first goal. It seems like a really good crowd, and I'm really hoping imagine New York City FC play in the FIFA Club Championship. New York having a chance to win a legit world title. I know it would be a long shot. They still have to face the semis and the final in the CONCACAF, and probably when they go to the FIFA Club World Cup, they have to face either the probably the South American team and then the European team. But still, though, it will be historical if a New York team can make a run like that. But the game is tied 1-1, 65 minutes into the game in the second half. But also tonight at midnight, Seattle faces Leon from Mexico, and then New England Revolution faces Pumas from Mexico, and then on Thursday, Montreal from Canada faces Cruz Azul from Mexico. So the Mexican teams are really three traditional teams. So I mean, it's going to be tough for the MLS teams. Montreal, Seattle, Revolution, and those three. But it'll be historical if Montreal, Revolution, Seattle, and New York advance. Will be the first time ever an MLS team wins the CONCACAF Champions League. It will be historical. And New York just scored. New York just scored with Maximiliano Morales 66 minutes. A goal from an open play from Maximiliano Morales. They're in front again, 2-1. Let's go, New York City FC. They're my MLS team. I remember when they came to Nashville to play a friendly game in 2019, and the player gave me their jersey and their shorts, their whole kit. They gave it out to me. I was in the stands. I still have that jersey. Of course, it doesn't fit me, but I have that jersey. I still remember that moment. Oh, they played at First Tennessee Park. Was 2-0. There was a couple of fans there as well, but I was the only one with with jerseys and everything. I remember it was so much rain that night. I was all wet. Oh, but it was worth it. I will never forget rooting for NYCFC in Nashville. So I hope they can make it a run. Speaking of CONCACAF as well as Mexican soccer, also tragic event. I don't know if you saw it in a soccer match between Atlas and Querétaro, and in the second half, all hell broke loose. A big fight between the two. I even call fans. They're two organized crime, and the whole
The
gang
whole
started fighting. And there were reports that 20 fans died and other 40 fans were injured. Querétaro was kicked out of the league. The current ownership group were forced to vacate it and return it to the previous ownership group. The stadium was closed for 5 years, and was just a disgrace. It was just sad images from from Mexico, and was just really really sad. It was on Saturday night. I don't remember even the last time something like that happened on the stadium.
what? Because I'm looking at a video of it now. What it reminds me of, I don't know if you remember. I think it was Egypt, Port Said a couple of years ago, like
Yeah,
2012.
those, yeah, and also reminds me of Hillsborough in 1989, where 96 fans also died on a stampede because of unruly fans. So you know, it just makes me sad because soccer for me is a world sport, and where a soccer fan I think about me because I'm a soccer fan. I've been to many stadiums watching soccer, and
Okay. It's interesting to me. It's like, 'cause I'm looking at the LA Times stories about how the local government claims no one died, but the independent observers are saying that the 20 had died.
yeah, that's they're very confusing claims. Also, there are rumors that the security of the stadium helped the fight, were actually helping the people fighting instead of stop the fight. So there are a lot of rumors, but still, I think it's
So, I mean, was it like, cartels that were like kind of participating in this? Because I
yeah,
know that happens a ton where like they basically block local government and they might have been using this as an attack.
yes, definitely. They probably gangs used the soccer game as a way to promote violence and maybe getting to the point. But it's still sad because it was on a soccer game. There were many families, many innocent people that were just there to watch a soccer game, and it looks like 20 of those soccer fans never came back home, never gonna see another soccer game again, and it's just really really sad moment for North America soccer. Not only Mexico, because you know it's just a sad situation. But moving on to a happy situation, this weekend it was registered the Charlotte FC first home game broke the MLS attendance crowd with 74,479 fans, just 388 seats short of completely packing Bank of America Stadium, the home of the Carolina Panthers. So they debut, I believe, versus LA Galaxy. Unfortunately, they couldn't get the win. They ended up losing the game 1-0 in a beautiful goal, but still was historical night for the South. I believe, another team in the South that has a big crowd, We have Orlando. I watched the Atlanta United start their journey in the MLS back in 2017 and the large crowds, and now it looks like Charlotte FC also started strong with a large crowd. I mean, it's not new, and a team from the South debuting with a loss. Atlanta United also had a really big crowd in the first game. It was still when they play in Georgia Tech football stadium, but they lost 2-1 versus New York Red Bull. But still, it's really good for soccer in the South to see now Charlotte, North Carolina getting that much fans into a soccer game.
Yeah, I mean it's pretty. That's for sure.
Yeah, and just quick results. Chicago and Orlando tied 0-0. Another team from the South, the Atlanta United, lost to Colorado 3-0. Nashville tied 1-1 versus Minnesota. I believe Nashville is going to take a while for them to play at home. They want to play in their new stadium,
Yeah,
which is going to be
I kind of
exciting.
two comments. You have one on Charlotte, one on Nashville. I wonder how much of this push in Charlotte, to support their team, is kind of born by a desire to get another team because you either have an NFL, got the NBA team, NHL's in Raleigh, and the only team not there is an MLB team. So I know Charlotte's trying to fight for that, and of course Nashville too. In addition to Charlotte winning an MLB team, I wonder how far their soccer stadium is from being ready because I know it's right next to the National Fairgrounds racetrack.
But they're doing good. Nashville is in fourth place with one loss and one win. They're in fourth place. The Austin is in first place with 2 home wins in the Western Conference. In the East Conference, the New York Red Bulls got 2 road wins. DC United also second, Columbus third, Orlando fourth, and so it's so weird that Nashville plays in the Western division in the Western Conference. I feel like it's so weird because they, I guess, technically should be in the Eastern Conference because they are the
Yeah.
only
I mean,
team.
you have to remember that 85% of the American population lives in the Eastern or Central time zones. So Nashville, really, I think about the median population. Well, the center of the American population is in Kansas. So, I mean, and there's so many big cities on the East Coast, and Nashville just naturally ends up being one of the on the western half of the big cities.
I guess, I guess also there also have been like that in hockey, right, with the NHL.
Correct. Yeah, the Predators are also in the Western Conference, and the Memphis Grizzlies are in the Western Conference of the NBA.
Yeah,
So it's just
that's
naturally, it's just kind of how that works. Although, think about it, Chicago and Milwaukee are west of Nashville, technically, but they're in the east.
yeah, it's kind of tricky, and also they have to have even number of teams in the conferences, and now they're in 28. So it looks like a fun start to the MLS. Only two, some teams have 3 games, others, I believe, all the teams play 2 games, so they're gonna start week 3. But I definitely want to keep it up with the MLS because I loved covering the MLS. I mean, you had the opportunity to cover as well, and it's a upcoming league, and I was so happy that Charlotte got a large crowd. I was expecting that. I was a little bit skeptical. And New York, just to close up the American topics, New York scored again, 3-1. Santiago Rodriguez scored 3-1 to New York. The New York City FC making a good advantage. Having a 2 goal differential to play on the road next week is a good result. 3-1, legit. And I'm also rooting for Thiago Andrade and Thales Magno, 2 great young Brazilian stars starting for New York City FC as well.
Hopefully they can continue to go all the way down in this tournament and find their way to that Club World Cup because, as you said, that would be huge for the MLS and their profile on the international stage.
And speaking, so let's switch to Brazilian topics, but still talking about kind of relates to NYCFC because the City Group which is the ownership group of New York City FC and Manchester City, is interested in buy a Brazilian soccer team. They already made an offer to Atletico Mineiro, the current Brazilian national champion, for 1 billion reais. Technically, Atletico Mineiro is still not, let's say, a team that is already approved their, like their public offering, or as we call here, the SAF, the Anonymous Society of Football, Soccer. It's kind of like, having like you start to have open trade or be able to negotiate for a group to be the owners, but they're interested. They know the potential on the Brazilian market. I feel like with, Brazilian soccer being, that growing value, of course they're interested also in developing players. You like look how like they have already two young stars in NYCFC, and they're already making a difference. And Thales Magno was such a crucial player for NYCFC to win the league, and other MLS teams are getting interested in young Brazilian stars. So they want to invest here to develop those stars, and have like NYCFC is to Manchester City, a developmental kind of, you know group, a developmental team for the European side, or even to sell players. So just it's interesting to see they're interested in a Brazilian team.
Yeah, and we've talked about this before. How there is concern about outside groups coming in, buying in these teams because that could change the culture of soccer, in any country, including Brazil. And surely, I hope that if they go in and they do buy this team, that they focus on just business, right? You don't try to change the culture. You don't try to change the fan culture. You you utilize the Brazilian soccer culture to enhance your product. You don't try to change it to an American style product. So that's just something that I hope this group does not keeps in mind as they go into a new market.
Yeah, Atletico Nero, they did not they did not accept the proposal, and they didn't take the first offer. I believe they can make another offer. And the problem is Atletico Nero has a big debt. They're currently right now is 1.3 billion reais in debt, but they also are building a new stadium with a partnership with a construction company, and also they have a lot of good players, huge fan base in the one of the most fanatical. They are not the largest fan base, but their fan base is really fanatic. It's the one of the most fanatic fan base I have ever seen in sports. They went 40 years without a meaningful title, but their stadiums were full. Their passion is still kept. They went to second division, but I mean, I feel like Atletico Mineiro, and their rival Cruzeiro was already purchased by an ownership group led by Ronaldo. So it will be interesting to see if they also another team from Minas Gerais, one of the largest team, kind of follow the path. And to finish up with Brazilian topics, my favorite topic, the Paulista State Championship. It's going on week 10, only 2 weeks away for the end of the regular season before the playoffs. It was kind of like it's kind of like a rivalry time, because now all the rivalry games kind of crunch up, and it started on Saturday. São Paulo defeating Corinthians at home 1-0. Again, Jonathan Caleri scored in the first minute of the game. This guy, I feel like he has potential for the MLS, because he has not played well in the European market. He went to West Ham United, and I believe Spanish league didn't do well, but in Brazil he's a scorer. He's one of the most like best strikers. He scored a goal on the winning goal for São Paulo Corinthians. Um, and Corinthians didn't play well. I feel like they're still adapting to their new head coach, a Portuguese head coach, Vitor Pereira. I mean, I feel like Corinthians has a lot of potential. They already qualified for the playoffs, but still, definitely stinks to lose to their rival when their new head coach debuts. Palmeiras got another title, the South America called the Recup, the winner of Libertadores versus the winner of the Copa Sul-Americana. It's kind of like I don't know how to I don't even know how to compare. It's like the first division of South American Championship versus the second division of South American Championship. But Palmeiras got the title 2-0 at home, and on Sunday I was in that game. They won 2-0 versus Guarani. Their biggest question is on the is in the offense because they don't have a striker. They don't have a legitimate striker. Rafael Navarro was supposed to come and fill the gap, of having a good season for Botafogo, but he still didn't find his rhythm in Palmeiras. Abel Ferreira, the coach, he still believes in him. He still has his potential. He was the starter on Sunday, but the fans are not buying it. The fans still want Leila Pereira, the president and de facto owner, to get a proper striker, maybe even an European striker. One of the targets that Palmeiras had was Tati Castellanos, who is currently playing for New York City FC. But they're playing really well. They won 2-0. They are in the top of their group, and I believe Palmeiras, all the four big teams are going to qualify for the playoffs. Santos maybe is the one who's most kind of still at risk. They're currently out of the qualification, but their game, Santos game, was postponed due to a thunderstorm that made the stadium be without lights. So,
Mhm.
and I think they're
Is I do have a question. Does Palmeiras still have enough space for all the trophies they've been winning recently? Is-
yes, definitely. I mean, there's one you know trophy room space which is still vacant, the FIFA Club World Cup, but I believe yeah, I mean, but Abel Ferreira did not. He refused the first offer to renew his contract. I think he's gonna leave at the middle of the season, at the start of the European season. I believe he has definitely market in European soccer. He proved himself here in Brazil, winning back-to-back Libertadores. Facing Chelsea and taking Chelsea all the way to extra time. Winning the Brazilian Cup. Winning the Recopa Sul-Americana. Be competitive as Palmeiras is. I feel like I don't think he's gonna stay longer than more like I say 3 to 4 months. I think he's gonna go back to Europe. He probably a Portuguese team might take him, or even a team from Spain or Italy, because he definitely proved himself here in Brazil. And Santos advanced today in a very very emotional game. In versus Fluminense of PLE in the second stage of Brazilian Cup. They were losing up until the 82nd minute. Then Ricardo Goulart tied the game. Then went to penalties. They won 5-4 penalty kicks. But Santos definitely is the most at risk to not make it the playoffs in the Paulista State Championship. And the fight for relegation. That's the fight because Ponte Preta, the oldest team in Brazilian, the oldest active team in Brazil, is at risk of relegating for the Paulista Second Division. The last time they were relegated, I believe, was in the late '90s for the state, relegation. But they are at risk. They are playing really bad soccer, and it's going to be a big fight. And this weekend, it's going to be very, big weekend for state tournament here.
and what
In,
exactly would be the consequences if they were to be relegated from this division? So you said they're in the second division right now. So
yeah,
like
I know it's complicated. They're in the second division in the national tournament and the first division in the state. If they get demoted, there's no consequences, but they lose big revenue, lose big revenue because the second division, the state second division, pays way less than the first division because in the second division division, there's no broadcasting deal because only the league itself broadcasts the game, in an online platform called 11. YouTube broadcasts one game a week, but it's more like you know, comes with a package. They bought the first division, so it's not like they are interested in the second division. So it affects them financially. Really, it hit. If Ponte Preta has like 30 million reais in debt, they did not advance to the second round in the Brazilian Cup. Another, they lost, I believe, it was like a million reais in revenue as well. So fans are worried. The Ponte Preta is known to have passionate and even violent fans. I don't want to even be near the stadium on the last week of regular season if they got relegated because it's going to be chaos. Because those fans
I
don't
do
support.
think it would lead to the club falling apart if they got kicked out with all the debt and the
I
lack of revenue.
I would be worried if they were because last season they were saved in the last week in relegation for the third division in the Brazilian league, and they thought, oh, we got saved, we were good. They didn't take seriously the risk. They didn't got good players. They didn't make good investment in the roster. They got two really old players that they haven't played well. They got their dad, which is a good defender, but he hasn't played in 2 years. He was the one that screwed it up in the last game versus Agua Santa. It was more like a marketing hire than actual like improving the roster. And the president cares more about political rivalries with their own team, like disputing with another, political group in their own club, calling out names, calling out members, other members that were part of past Ponte Preta administrations, then worry about the team. He gave like a speech, not even called a press conference speech, after firing a coach, which was 12 minutes long. Probably 2 to 3 minutes was actually about the coach, and the rest only talk about political rivalries with Ponte Preta. They just show how lost they are and how much confusion they are in their own club. It's just sad because Ponte Preta was founded in the 1900s. They are 122 years old. They are the oldest active soccer team in Brazil. So it's sad to see, a club like that really fall apart.
Yeah, I mean, because you can't always replicate a club like that with that type of history. So hopefully they can find a way to stay in that top division, because otherwise, it'd be devastating.
And they're gonna face Corinthians on the road on Saturday. So that's why it looks like it's gonna be a hell of a mission because and then they ended up at home versus Ituano, which is a team that is playing for a qualification in the playoffs. So
Yeah, so there's a bit of a nutty story that kind of just it's happened actually while we've been doing the show. Um, so one of the conference title games tonight for March Madness, Northeastern Conference, between the Bryant Bulldogs and the Wagner Seahawks. So this is a game that was played on a college campus, ended in a melee between different fan bases apparently. Um, and obviously nothing like what we saw in Mexico with the what Atlas versus Queteric, I believe that's how you say
yeah,
that.
Atlas and Querétaro.
Etc. Yes. Um, but yeah, you had like people throwing stuff at the opposing team and everything else. Bryant won
What,
that game to
what's
finish
the name of the
their
team?
Bryant and Wagner. Definitely take a look at that because that certainly was an interesting situation between fan bases. It's really a pretty insane situation. So, unfortunately, more unruly fans because there are, and they had to basically vacate the arena fans to finish the game.
What is the name of the arena?
I don't know what it's really small. It's oh what? Let me look
Because
this up. So,
I'm trying to find the
I don't
news.
even know where I don't even know where that is. It's in Smithville, Rhode Island. Bryant University. Let's see what's even the gym called. It is Basketball gym.
Because I want to find the footage of that.
It's called the Chase Athletic Center.
Chase Ath- Athletic.
Yeah, only has 2,000. Um, here, let me. I'm gonna send you a link in the DMs actually here.
Okay.
You can take a look at it because it's certainly really interesting. Because I started getting a whole bunch of notifications on it.
That's the thing. He is so
Wow. Wow. Reminds me of a little bit of soccer unruly. Definitely.
Yeah, that isn't gonna go over well in like in especially on a college campus. There'll be like repercussions for the student body, I'm sure. Like so there's a couple of like tweets here, for example, from Nap LaJoy. The NSC, which is Northeastern Conference Championship, is out of control. It's being played on the one seed Bryant home court. Fight among fans and possibly Wagner players. Dude just started flipping off the camera. Bryant 80 telling fans to start leaving so they can finish the game. Bottles are flying. Reminds me of Tennessee Ole Miss to an extent.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I, I I know it's bad because of course it affect the game, but it kind of it. I love when you have that kind of atmosphere of rivalry, but of course you don't want unruly behavior to affect the game, and that's what looks
Oh no.
like it.
Yeah, it's got to be measured. You can't have it, harming people and affecting the outcome of the game in that way. But are you ready to head into hot takes?
Yeah, you go first.
All right, so I'm gonna do a little bit of a NASCAR take. So Alex Bowman, driver of the 48 for Hendrick Motorsports, won his first race of the season on Sunday, outdueling Kyle Larson in a two-lap shootout at the end. That was Alex Bowman's seventh win overall in his career. Now, several of his wins have been what you would say are lucky wins. For example, he won a race last year at Pocono where Kyle Larson, the guy he battled for this last win, blew a tire in the last corner and Bowman passed him and won. Um, he's never necessarily dominated a race, but he has 7 wins. And you just don't luck into 7 wins. William Byron, who has somewhat better stats overall, has a better average finish by a position throughout his career. And in the same amount of races, only has 2 wins. So, you're doing something right if you've won 7 races in NASCAR. Like, he's not a Hall of Fame driver or anything, but he's doing pretty well in good equipment. But Kyle Busch, who's one of the greatest drivers ever, is you who was going to win, but because of a late wreck, kind of ended up losing the race due to pit strategy, said that he's sick and tired of Alex Bowman backdooring in the wins, and I disagree with that. You have you can lead every lap of a race, but you have to lead the final one too. And just because you dominated a race, which Kyle Busch didn't, he had probably the best car by the end, but you know, that's why it's a team sport. Like it's not just about the driver. You have to look at your crew chief. Why did you take 4 tires instead of 2? You gave up that track position that you desperately needed at the end of the race to win. And Alex Bowman give his team, Greg Ives' crew chief, the credit that they deserve, that they picked the right pit strategy, which won them the race. And it's just all about finding a way to the end. It's 400 miles for a reason. You can't be the best car for 399 miles and screw up at the last mile. It's like leading a football game for 59 minutes and letting the other team come back and score in the last minute. You have to finish it out. And Kyle Busch just couldn't finish this one out, and he can whine about Alex Bowman being the luckiest driver in NASCAR all he wants. But Alex Bowman won the race fair and square. So go and win Phoenix this week. This week, Kyle. If you're going to whine about other drivers winning.
Yeah. And for my hot take is about the state of the 2 largest teams in the south of Brazil, Grêmio and Internacional. They are, I feel like, probably so meaningful to Brazilian soccer history. Both won two Libertadores, many national titles, but they look like they hit, probably not. I don't say they hit rock bottom. They probably, but they are in not in a good state. Their rivalry game in the state tournament was postponed due to unruly fan behavior and rocks through at Gremio's bus. But on the field, both were eliminated in the Brazilian Cup first round by Grêmio. Was okay. Grêmio was not total surprise because they were defeated by Mirassol, which is doing a fantastic Paulista State Championship. They are in the Brazilian third division, but Internacional lost to a team named Globo, which is not even in any national Brazilian national division. They lost 3 out of their 10 games this season, and Internacional was favored to win by 3 goals, and they lost 2-0. Okay, the game is at Global Stadium, but still, Internacional was the favorite, was the first division team, was probably one player, one international salary player who played for the whole roster a month salary of the entire global roster. So it still, so I feel like Grêmio, which is in the second division, they were relegated last year, so they're gonna play the second division this year. And International was relegated not too long ago. I feel like was like 5 years ago. I mean, they have the potential to be good teams, but currently they are in such a mess, and it just makes me sad because they're in a good rivalry. They are the in the top 12 largest teams in Brazil, but they had a really messy week, and their fans are just mad with the front offices.
Yeah, it's just it kind of go back to the previous club you're talking about. It's always difficult when you see a successful club going through a really dark time. But that just means that at some point, hopefully, there's a hero that comes from somewhere and helps brings those former clubs and teams back to dominance and can make those fan bases proud again.
Yeah, I feel like Internacional, of course, being on the first division, have a more experienced, roster, can turn around. But the thing is like they both of them were upset. It's like Tennessee and Florida going to the NCAA basketball the tournament, and were upset on the same week by teams from the SoCon conference. It would be something the SEC itself will question. It would be something, you know, even though they're two good programs with a lot of tradition, I feel like it's something that should not happen, but it did, and it just, of course, it's interesting. And just last update on New York game. They won 3-1 versus Comunicaciones from Guatemala. So they took a 2-goal lead to the second game. I believe they're going to qualify. I hopefully they'll make it to the semifinals, but they won 3-1 versus Comunicaciones. So that's it for tonight's two countries, two Americas, all sports. Again, happy International Women's Day. Of course, I'm gonna dedicate the show to my mom, but especially my grandmother, Emilia Camargo. She was the reason I got into sports. She was the reason I got into journalism. Her passion for sports was such influence on me because normally in sports you got your passion from a male figure, right? A dad, an uncle. For me, it was my grandmother. The way she rooted for Corinthians, the way she watched soccer was so intense that influenced me to be a soccer fan and to be a sports journalist. So, in this International Women's Day, I dedicated the show to my grandmother, Emilia Camargo, which, I always remember being one of the die-hard Corinthians and soccer fans I ever saw.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, just happy International Women's Day, and in my life, I can think of women too that I shared many sports moments with. So it's a obviously it's a great day, and I'm glad we were able to talk about a lot of great women's sports moments. And over the next few weeks, I'm definitely looking forward to talking to someone about the NCAA Women's Tournament. Um, because I think it's going to be a very interesting one. It's not completely set in stone who's going to win that. There's a couple of teams who are going to have their chances.
But for Nicholas Hill down in Chattanooga, Tennessee, I'm Gus Tomazeli here in Americana, São Paulo, Brazil. Thanks for watching and listening, and I'll see you guys next week. And take care.
Like every day. Yes, y'all. You know we never stop, we never rest, y'all. The